I am Daniel Hughes, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. She is the author of the children's book It's Okay Not to Know, no other than Miss Brenda Doe. Welcome to Book 101, Miss Brenda, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yes. Thanks for having me, first of all, Daniel. So I really appreciate it. Um, actually, I am a content copywriter and sales copywriter by trade. And I've been spending like almost 20 years now writing for tech industries and doing thought leadership articles for executives. So people normally ask, why did you write a children's book? Because it's completely opposite of what I've been doing for the last 20 years. And especially since I've been talking to C suite people most of my career, and suddenly talking to children, and I've never had any children of my own. It just seems like really something that no one would ever expect from me. And so, about 3 years ago, I went from being a copywriter to being a children's book author. I was inspired by something that I've observed about my own family and my little nephew at the time, and the book itself, "It's Okay Not to Know," was inspired by that. In many ways, being a children's book author and being a copywriter, it's actually there's a through line because as a copywriter, you're supposed to be really observant about humanity because we have to help try to gauge people, figure out where they are, figure out what they're scared of, and all that kind of stuff, and then figure out from their belief system how we can help guide them along so they can start understanding something different. And because of that, copywriters, good copywriters, are big observers of humanity. I mean, I could sit in a coffee house at a Starbucks and just watch people all day long. And what fascinates me about the whole thing is I always wonder, why do they do what they do? And that's what inspired me to write the children's book. So that was a kind of a long introduction.
Yes, Miss Brenda Doe, thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. What are the essential elements of a successful children's book?
I don't know what the essential elements are per se of a children's book versus any other book. From my experience and my belief is that if a child can connect with it as well as the person, the adult that's reading the book to them, then that is essential. It's got to be something that they can feel deep down inside and understand and grasp the message of. Whether it's a deep learning book, such as the one that I provide, or if it's something just for entertaining, just something that is just for fun to get another emotion out of them, as long as they can connect with it, that's what makes it successful. How you do that? Through words, through pictures, through touch, like if someone's got a fuzzy book, anything like that. Whatever it takes to get them engaged is successful.
Definitely. So, how do you determine the appropriate age group of It's Okay Not to Know?
Well, when I wrote it as a picture book, and it was inspired. Picture books normally are for ages 2 through 6, maybe 7 years old. Uh, there's kind of a Trojan horse as well, because the message isn't anything new that anyone's never heard of before. Most adults have already heard the message. It's just packaged in a different way. So, my idea is to be able to take the concept of the book, not only teach it to children, because I think children are very open and they also know it. They come into this world knowing the message, they just forget it as they get older. But it's also what I call a Trojan horse because as the parents or the adults or the caregivers are reading it to the child, they're reminded of the message as well. Because the message of "it's okay not to know" is to teach people how to overcome challenges by being compassionate and loving towards themselves, and by being curious about why something isn't working, or being curious and know to how to figure out how to get through a struggle. So instead of saying as a child, oh, I can't do this, or I'm not smart enough, I'm not whatever enough, instead of falling down and thinking that they can't do anything or get over an obstacle, instead they're going to be curious and go, ooh, I wonder how I can do this, or I wonder what happens if I do this. And as they start being curious, then they start realizing, and they overcome their challenges, they start realizing that they're more powerful than they really are. So when they meet their next challenge, they meet it with curiosity and compassion, and they start thinking about how they can overcome that as well. And so that's the message. And that's something that I think most adults can also remind themselves of as well, because we tend to get very hard on ourselves, thinking that we have to understand something quickly. We have to be perfect at something, that we're supposed to be at the top of something very, and the whole learning curve as adults, we think it's supposed to be shorter than it really is. But when we remember how to take a step back and realize, oh, hey, all I need to do is just figure out how to do this. I just need to know that I can do it. And then as I keep taking more steps, I'll eventually get there. And in the meantime, when I fall, I'm not going to get down on myself. I'm just going to pick myself back up and I'm going to try again. And so that's the message.
Try and try until you succeed, people. Very well said, Miss Brenda. Very well said. What role does illustration play in the storytelling process for children's books?
I think the illustrations are key. Because the kids themselves aren't going to necessarily know all of the words, which it's a good learning opportunity to teach new vocabulary. But they're really gravitating towards the images, the colors. And my illustrator, Casey Fritz, he's a genius. I asked him to create a world for me based on this book. I wanted the characters of the book to be as inclusive as possible, because for anyone who's not seeing this podcast, I am of Chinese descent. And when I was growing up in the US in the 70s, there were no books in the libraries at school or in the public libraries in town that had any characters that looked anything like me. Everybody in the book was white. And we're getting a little bit better about it now, but books still, by and far, can be a lot more inclusive than they are. So, as a child, looking at all these books of white kids, seeing their stories and learning about all this kind of stuff, subconsciously, I started to believe, if I'm not like them, I must not be good enough. So, that whole not enoughness started picking up. And then I couldn't totally relate with the book, and because the characters didn't resemble me in any way. So when I wrote this children's book, I wanted to make sure it was as inclusive as possible. So we created a little cute monster world. That way, any child from any background with any physical nature of any sort can relate to the book, because the characters aren't human. And the protagonist of the book, uh, their name is Bink. And I came up with that name because, as far as I know, it is a sound that most children can say, no matter what language they speak. And then also, Bink themselves is non gendered. So that way, any child can feel like they can connect with with the book as well.
Yes, for sure they can relate. So how did you crafted the characters that make the children can relate to and love?
Yeah, it just through cuteness. That's basically it. So by having a mythical world like the monsters, like I mentioned earlier, and then also having the talented Casey Fritz do all the illustrations, creating what we call lovable monster, uh, and then also the colors and then the movements and everything. Then that's how I can engage the readers some more. Uh, the I can have all of the great accolades from all the adults in the world, but to me, the biggest accolade that I can ever get is when a child picks up the book on their own and they just want to read it, and look through the pictures and just stare at it, touch the pictures. That makes me the happiest.
Definitely. Satisfied. What techniques did you use to hold a child's attention throughout the story?
I used a lot of rhyme because I remember when I was a child, I grew up with, Dr. Seuss and Shel Silverstein, and I loved his books, their books. And then so when I came up with this one, I thought rhyming would be really fun. And then so by having that alliteration, by having the rhyme, by having the rhythm, because it's supposed to be a read aloud book, since most kids at the young age groups that this targets can't quite read yet. And then so I figured with that, then that makes it engaging as well, because it's just the rhythm of the voice and it's easier to remember.
So, speaking of rhythm and rhyme, what important it is in writing for younger readers?
I think keeping the concepts and the sentences, or not concepts, but keeping the sentences short. Uh, and I do this for adults as well, because, as a copywriter, because I'm writing content for adults. And it's not, and I usually write for, these are executives, mind you. I normally write at an eighth to ninth grade level. And I don't do that because they can't understand anything more complex. It's because most people are really busy. They've got a 5 million things on their minds. So they just need to get the gist and understand it and be able to retain it. So it's the same thing, but just, at a different grade level for little kids. So it's really important when you're writing to make sure the sentences are kept short, that they're also sentences that they can relate to and understand. Because if they're tripping over words and always asking, the adult, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? Then it just slows down the fun of the book itself.
Yes, short and easy to grasp. What themes are most popular or meaningful in children's literature today?
That I cannot tell you. So I do not know. I gotta tell you, when I wrote this book, I wasn't planning on being an author. I wasn't planning on any of the things that I'm doing right now. I wrote it because I woke up one day and I could not get it out of my head. And so I decided, all right, fine. It was a Sunday morning. So I went ahead and just whipped it out, the content itself, the copy. And then I put it away, I think I wrote it in less than an hour around there. And then I took a walk. A couple hours later, I came back and it was still nagging in the back of my head. So I gave it another half an hour of edits. And that's it. So I wrote the entire book in an hour and a half because it was something that just had to get out. And so when you ask me these wonderful questions about the industry, about literature, about rules and everything else for children's book, this is my first children's book. So I don't know. I would love to find out, and I listen to your podcast to find out, but that's it.
Yes.
I wrote this because I felt it was a message that had to get out. And that's why I'm out here getting the word out, because when kids read this and they light up, it makes me so happy because it's a tool for them. It's something that I wish I had when I was growing up. I mean, I was talking to a friend whose son was learning how to tie his shoes, and he was so angry with himself because all the other kids at school were already figuring out how to tie their shoes, and he was still struggling. So then he started to feel like he wasn't enough, like he wasn't fast enough, he wasn't smart enough, whatever it happened to be, he wasn't enough. And that's a slippery slope. And so if he had this book he could read, and his mom could sit with him and say, okay, it's okay not to know, because you're trying, you're being curious, you're learning how to do this, you're staying with it, and you're being compassionate towards yourself the whole time. So instead of beating yourself up, you're supportive to yourself, right? So that's why I wrote it. So it wasn't to become a literary genius. However, if someone wants to give me a prize for this, I would be totally happy to receive it. It was more so is to help people, and to I have a personal goal of uplifting 100 million kids in some capacity or other. So whether it's through this book, if the book becomes a syndicated cartoon, whatever it is, I want to help uplift 100 million children.
Definitely empowering children all over the world. So, Miss Brenda, what are the biggest challenges in writing dialogue for children?
uh, to make sure they can understand it, keep it simple enough so they can understand it. I think kids, they might not have the vocabulary or the experience yet, but I really believe they come into this world very powerful. And knowing that they're powerful is just what happens is well meaning adults accidentally kind of knock the power out of them, by teaching them lessons that really don't help. Like, for example, when we put an A paper um, on the refrigerator, it tells the child, oh, well, if you get an A, you're rewarded. So when you're A, you're loved. But we never put up C papers on the refrigerator. Very rarely do we ever do that. We always ask, well, what did you do well today? Or how well did you do at something? But we never ask, well, what did you fail at today? Well, what did you learn from that? And we don't reward trying. And then so that's what, oh my gosh, I got so sidetracked with my own little thought that I forgot the question. I'm so sorry. What was your question? I'm so sorry.
No worries, you get the idea. So, how did you balance entertainment with the educational value in It's Okay Not to Know?
I think through the rhyme and also through the illustrations, because kids, like I said earlier, they hear the alliteration, they hear the rhyming, they hear the words and everything, so it feels like fun. So that's the entertainment. But at the same time, oh, that was the message I was thinking about earlier. They know that they're powerful. They know that they can do a lot in this world, and they really understand. Yeah, this feels right. They get it. Kids get it. They see that the book tells them it's okay to be powerful. It's okay to make mistakes and then discover who you truly are, so you can live a bigger life. They get that.
Yes, kids nowadays like a sponge. They absorb easily what they are reading or what they are seeing, watching. And what role does humor play in engaging young readers?
I think humor is really important because it keeps everything light. It keeps it fun. Kids are all about fun. They
Yes,
love to laugh, and that's how I wish we as adults could remember and be more like kids in that way every single day. I mean,
definitely.
how great would the world be if we woke up
Yes,
every single morning and just asked ourselves, how much more can I laugh today? How can I have fun today? Like, how can I have fun at work or doing the dishes or whatever it happens to be that we have to do as adults? How can we make that more fun? And then so I think that's why I feel humor is really important. Really, any emotion is important because kids feel big feelings and they're very raw, they're very honest, they're very transparent. But of course, it would be a lot more fun to have them feel happiness than anything else.
true, true. I really agree. 100% to you, Miss Brenda. I wish we have that mind because kids always let it go fast.
Yeah.
They let it go very fast and they have fun, fun, fun. And what strategy did you use to develop a unique and memorable writing voice for It's Okay Not to Know?
I didn't have a strategy. It just came right out. So, it was part of that
Congratulations.
whole just it got downloaded and I just typed it all out and that was that. Uh, and I'm sure subconsciously I was influenced by the books I read as a child, with the Dr. Seuss's and the Shel Silverstein, because I remember them being so fun. And English is my second language. So when I first learned English and I heard the rhymes and I heard the lightness of the words and everything else, it just resonated with me. So I'm sure that stuck with me too when I was writing this.
I encourage you to do more children's book, Miss Brenda. Though let's empower
Oh,
children all over the world.
thank you.
Make a series, a 100 series of It's Okay Not to Know. And what will be your advice for those aspiring writers out there in terms of children's book?
I would say always trust yourself, trust your gut, know that what you're putting out there deserves to be seen, deserves to be heard, and you're celebrated when you are seen and you're heard.
Definitely. What will be your short-term and long-term goals in writing children's book?
Just like you said, I'm going to have a series because I feel that Bink has more adventures to go out in the world. I really would love to be. I remember telling my publisher when I came out when this book came out. I told him that I intend to be more ubiquitous than Hello Kitty and Bluey. And so, so if I could be the next Bluey, awesome. I would love to do that, so I can teach kids a beautiful lesson about life and the joy of living and how amazing they are, and teach it to them every single day. That would be a gift.
Definitely. So to sum up our discussion, Miss Brenda, though, what common mistakes should writers avoid when creating a children's books?
When I'm sorry, I missed that. When they're doing
Avoid
what to
when
children's book?
creating, yeah.
Oh, when creating, sorry. um I don't know if there's a common mistake. All I would say is don't shortchange yourself when you're writing, because I always believe that whatever we create, we're creating it because it's a gift that's within us that we want to bring out into the world. And so if you edit it, if you suppress it, if you do anything and doubt yourself and constantly, cut it down or tame it or do whatever, then you're saying to your soul that what you're creating isn't good enough. And I don't believe in that. I believe to stay whatever you feel is right, and whatever you feel you want to get it out there. There will always be an audience for it.
Definitely. Stop procrastinating, people. If you have the passion to write any kind of books, well, write, and share to the world. So, Miss Brenda Doe, thank you so much for empowering our future generations. I hope and I encourage you again to make more series of It's Okay Not to Know. So, Miss Brenda, can you please invite our listeners to support It's Okay Not to Know?
Oh, thank you. Yes, they can learn and find out everything about the book at brendadoe.com. That's spelled BRENDADO.com. You can order it there or ask for it in any of your local bookstores.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Brenda Doe because if you support her, more empowering children's books to come. So, Miss Brenda, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
More to come, people. See you soon.